Keep your radio and television on at all times. Stay indoors and avoid contact with other people. Do not attempt to telephone outside your local area. Do not panic and remain civil and calm.
Everybody's Gone to the Rapture is kind of a mixed bag, but at least it's an interesting one.
Yeah, it's unique. It definitely makes its mark. And it comes from a legacy of doing that because Dear Esther was kind of the first walking simulator that really created the genre, right?
Yeah, at least the first big one. Dear Esther was a mod that sort of took off on its own. And I think they eventually remade the mod as a full game. And that one's extremely strange. I did play Dear Esther. I did not fully get into it. And the story was so obtuse with Dear Esther, I can't remember a thing about it. If you're coming at this and you're not sure if Everybody's Gone to the Rapture is just another Dear Esther, I will say that the story is way more clear than Dear Esther. Way more straightforward, although it is super metaphorical and loose in that sense. Maybe let's start with some of the positive, and then we can work our way down to some of the negative aspects of this game. So, I think the most obvious positive thing that we can bring up is just the production, right? Music, the visuals, some of the voice acting, right?
Yeah. Some of the voice acting and definitely just the visuals throughout the game make this game a lot more spectacular, as in it has more spectacle than Dear Esther. Because Dear Esther, is kind of simplistic, and this one has some magical effects in it, and it has just some really beautiful, sights to be seen throughout. So it's a lot more interesting just from that aspect, just like you're walking through a more interesting world inherently.
Yeah, the lighting helps a lot, right? Because throughout the game, you start off at one time of the day, and as you progress and trigger certain events, the time of day slowly shifts. And so then lighting shifts corresponding with that. And it works nicely, I think. You're going through some really serene-looking English townships, right? So you get to view a whole variety of homes, and they're empty. There's no people. But they're modeled well enough that every once in a while, I think there's a really nice screenshot type moment. Where you could definitely take a picture and share it with friends, and they'll be like, wow, this game looks incredible. It looks almost like a tech demo in some respects. And the music lifts it up. Am I right? The music is...
Well, the music is really phenomenal. It's arguably my favorite thing about the game. It's really subtle most of the time, but it swells at just the right moments, and it pairs well with the actual story and what's going on. Right? It makes you really care about it.
And it's composed by the co-developer Jessica Curie, who did a fantastic job. She composed the music for all of their games, including, they also did Amnesia, Machine for Pigs, apparently. And so that includes Dear Esther. She composed all that music, and it's really phenomenal music. Definitely check it out. I've been listening to it quite a bit since playing this game.
I suppose from that we can assume that they really are serious about this whole quarantine thing.
I think the music really helps sell a lot of the emotion that maybe the writing doesn't always match with, right? Because the writing definitely aims for drama and emotion across the board.
But the writing, unfortunately, not unlike a soap opera, is kind of very much tailored to the viewer, and it's a lot of exposition.
Yeah, that was a bit of a weird thing, right? You're walking through, and it's presented as if you're stumbling onto these events of these people's lives. So it's voyeuristic in that way, right? You're just sort of watching them live, except all of their lines are so clearly designed around an audience. And so I think the illusion gets a little broken. But in that sense, it's also a bit like a play.
Right. And you enjoy plays quite a bit, yeah?
Yeah, so I'm the type that I think a play is super amazing. I can really get into plays, even though I think plays require a certain suspension of disbelief because they're so over the top and so dramatic. And I think this one falls in line with that. It's extremely dramatic. There's a whole lot of relationships to follow and deal with. There's a whole lot of little petty asides and just grievances. And the way that it's written it doesn't necessarily sound like how people talk. But I think some of it, if you're willing to put the time into it and get interested in it, it could be quite enjoyable. Now, I know for you didn't like the game as much as I did, right? So what about the dialogue or just the way it's presented? Like, what sort of puts you out of it?
The dialogue is presented in this with these ghostly forms made out of light, and the forms kind of show up, and they will be talking in a moment that is presumably trying to be communicated to you by the little orb thing that you're following around. This orb kind of shows you these little vignettes of people's lives in the town, and in these vignettes, people will explain things that kind of happened at some other time. So I think that's the main thing that bothered me about it early on, was that I noticed that I was hearing people talk about things that were happening instead of seeing it happen.
Yeah.
It kind of breaks the show don't tell rule in a way.
Yeah, so like what you're describing is you're watching the past, right? Because this light is showing you something that happened in the past. And what you're watching is the two characters also talking about something that happened in the past.
Something further in the past, right?
Yeah, so as opposed to just having you see something happen, like literally watching a big event, you're more hearing about events, and that's the event you're watching, is the hearing of the event.
Right.
Right.
And it kind of creates an air of mystery and maybe a puzzle to be solved in order to figure out what goes on in the town, when in reality the events of the town are actually fairly simple. Not to spoil much, but like, for example, just there is, broadly speaking, a sort of problem in the town. There's like an epidemic going around in the town.
Yeah.
A bit of a thing that's affecting everybody.
And everyone's talking about it, right? It becomes like the focal point.
And yet, never in any of these flashbacks do you see someone experience the effects of that problem. It's always people talking about other people who have suffered from it. And it's that kind of problem in the storytelling that made me feel a little detached.
And it's unfortunate because I think some of the things that they try to touch on, like the quote unquote epidemic that's sort of taken over this town, it could be super fascinating in terms of like if they were actually more focused on showing some of the more immediate effects, I think it could have caused some really interesting drama to develop. Unfortunately, I think the drama that does develop is kind of generic, right? Like we were talking about this before recording this. It's sort of like they present the story as if it's really deep and profound, right? Like it's gonna really give you some insights into the human condition that's totally fresh and poetic and new. But what you end up getting is, I think if you boil it down to the essence of what you're seeing, it's as generic a story as you'd see on a soap opera anywhere. Right? And that's really unfortunate, because the format presents it as if it's way more artistic and deeper than that.
And in terms of at least the way that the game kind of wraps up and the lessons to be learned, that stuff is a bit more interesting. But overall, the journey to that is kind of fraught with just a lot of kind of trying to figure out what it all means.
Yeah. So let's talk about that journey a little bit in terms of mechanics, right? So if you're familiar with Dear Esther, it's a walking simulator, just like Dear Esther. Right? You're walking very slowly through a static environment. You're not going to be like doing puzzle solving or anything. You're not going to need to trigger certain mechanical type events in order to progress. You're really just walking through like a stage, and you get to explore that stage, and everything is set for you, right? Barely anything's moving, and that's the experience. And it's a fairly unexciting experience. I would dare to say it could be quite boring sometimes, and I think that's gonna turn a lot of people off from the game because it is quite boring. You found it boring, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, to me it's one of those things where I found myself motivating myself through the experience. Like I was finding reasons to get into it, but I don't think that the game actually gives you enough interesting stuff to pull you along. You kind of have to motivate yourself. which is a bit unfortunate. I compare it to a play a bit, and that it doesn't have enough. It doesn't have the same spectacle as like a film or something. It's a bit like a book too. Like you really have to be the type of person who doesn't mind going through quite a bit of drudgery to get to the parts of the game that are interesting. And most of the most interesting stuff happens near the end. Now we're not going to spoil any of that, but it does have an ending, and it does. It doesn't wrap up all the questions. It doesn't give you like an answer to every single thing that you want to know about, but it does give you an ending. It does give you like a clear, like, okay, here's enough information for you to kind of decipher on your own the meaning to all of this. Did you find the ending satisfying? Did you find like the last half interesting?
Well, I mean, at that point, personally, in my experience, I was kind of at the end of a long slog, and so I didn't feel that it was really satisfying. Overall, I feel the experience was pretty disappointing because it didn't have a lot of sort of literary value or dramatic value to really dig into.
Yeah.
But I mean, by the end, and just with that music, like with the score, I mean, it hit me a little bit, you know, like at least the music made me feel like something big was happening.
Yeah, it does tug on the heartstrings a bit by the end of the game. And I guess one of the troubles with recommending this game, because I enjoyed parts of it, right? Enjoy is maybe not the right word. I was really engaged with certain portions of this game. But having finished it, I do sort of feel like not all of my time was valued. There was a good chunk of time, and I know what they were going for. Like, I totally respect the goal to have a game just be earnest and heartfelt and just have a very specific theme that they want to stick to and they want to tell. I think that's fantastic. And it's nice to have a game that's not trying to appeal to the widest audience possible, right? But some of that stuff, unfortunately, aims higher than it hits. I think the writing is adequate, but it's not extraordinary. And unfortunately, the format presents itself as if it's going to be extraordinary. And it ends up, by the end of it, I don't know that it was worth completing, which is super unfortunate. Because it does take, it's not like the longest game ever. It's like a 5-hour experience, maybe. But yeah, I enjoyed parts of it. I'm glad I played through portions of it. I do like the memory of certain things about it, but I don't know that it was really worth it. It's hard to recommend. It's definitely, you got to be someone who doesn't mind being bored and who actually really wants to have a meditative, poetic experience. Like if that's what you want, then maybe go for it. It is beautiful.
Yeah, it's a long-term experience, and that can certainly, for a person with a certain kind of schedule or a person who wants to really invest a lot of time into a game and maybe meditate for a while, this is a good game. I mean, just in that respect, like for someone with the right expectations, I think you could really, just as long as you remember that it's not gonna be the most amazing story in the world. There's not gonna be a plot twist at the end. You know, it's not a blockbuster type of experience. Like, as long as you can really invest yourself in the idea that you're kind of playing like a really long music video. I don't know.
Yeah, no, actually, music video is an interesting comparison.
Yeah, it's like kind of the best. It's the prettiest music video I've seen, Beyonce's Lemonade notwithstanding. So, for that kind of experience, I think it does at the very least like show you something you've never seen before. It's a very graphically beautiful game.
Yeah, and there's some good ideas in it throughout. Like the light that you follow, I actually think it's interesting how they make sure that the light feels almost alive. It's a little playful. It doesn't, like most games, if they had a guide that you're following, it would just go in a straight line and just go like specifically to certain spots and make it very easy to follow. But this light, because in the narrative of the story, the light is supposed to be alive, they actually give it a certain degree of life. They make it kind of move in odd ways, and they make it run ahead of you a bit. And that's pretty cool. Like, I like ideas like that. I like that they committed to their narrative in that way, and they were sensitive to those sorts of subtleties.
Yeah, the sort of AI behavior of that ball really made it feel like it was alive. Sometimes it would just it would just hang out somewhere else for a while, and you wouldn't know where it was.
Mm-hmm.
And if there was any an aspect of the waiting experience in this game that was okay, is if there was ever a moment where the waiting was acceptable, it was waiting for that ball, because at least I knew that it was out there, kind of doing something on its own.
Yeah, and the game is it is a mostly linear experience, although there's open areas, right? Mm-hmm. So the ball's guided. The way that the little light works is it will kind of give you a nice, efficient way to go through these relatively open areas. But you don't have to follow the light if you don't want to. So like for my experience, I didn't follow the light for the first few areas, and it felt way more open to me, but I'm also getting the story in a fairly non-linear way that way, and it works. It functions in a non-linear way. But I did find that it was easy to get a little lost. So I think if you want a better experience, like I know you did follow the light.
Right. I was just straightforward. I just followed it like it was an objective marker.
Yeah, and if you do that, you will get the story, I think, more clearly. But it doesn't make too much of a difference. It's not, the areas are not so open that even if you do get lost, you're not going to get lost for that long. You can fairly easily get through each area and keep yourself organized mentally, and hit every house and hit every event trigger and make your way through. So overall, like, I think there's some good ideas in here. The effort is strong. They definitely have great production. The music is phenomenal. The visuals are phenomenal. They definitely put a lot of effort into it. I really feel for them. I hope that this game finds its audience. I think it's a very specific audience. But just keep in mind, this is not an entertaining experience. Right. So it leans far nearer to an art game than an entertaining one. But also keep in mind that if you're someone who already reads a lot of books and or already watches a lot of plays, this isn't going to hit that high watermark that those formats will hit. So it's trying to toe the line between the two, both the artistic and sort of the more open. And unfortunately, I don't know that it satisfies either. But I did enjoy it in parts. I did enjoy portions of it. If you want to finish your thoughts.
So yeah, overall, I mean, I felt like I would have wanted it to lean more towards the realism, but maybe that's just a personal preference. Overall, the game is kind of dreamy. And there's a value to that because the music complements it. So, yeah, I mean, the music mainly is, I think, the main takeaway that I would appreciate about this game.
Yeah, it is good. If you're not sure you want to buy the game, at least check out the soundtrack. I don't know, listen to it on Spotify or YouTube or wherever you can find it, because it's phenomenal. And check out Jessica Curie's other work. Dear Esther is a really great soundtrack too. I was listening to that recently. So that's it. I mean, this game, unfortunately, it's a bit of like a middling review. We're not super excited, but we don't hate it either. It's a middle ground type game. If you see it on sale, and if you're really curious and you're in the mood for something slow, but heartfelt and honest and earnest, right? Like it means what it says. At least it seems to. I think it's a worthwhile experience in that way. So check it out if that sounds interesting to you. If not, I think you'll be okay missing out on it.
All right.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Bye.